At WinOwl, we tell stories that don't always end well, but almost always leave something burning inside you. A question, a pang of guilt, a tiny suspicion about your own life. If you're here, it's because you're drawn to those stories you could have starred in yourself, or that someone very close to you could have. And before we dive in, I'm going to ask you for something. Subscribe to WinOwl, hit like on this video, and share it with that person who never trusts anything, or with the one who trusts way too much. People like to say, and at WinOwl we repeat it, that intense stories aren't pretty. They're true. What I'm going to tell you today isn't about a murderer or some tragic accident. It's about something quieter, a woman who married me to save herself from prison, a mother who saw what I refused to see, and the way love can be, at the same time, a scam and a revelation. The dilemma is easy to say, but hellishly hard to live. Who do you believe, your wife, or your mother? And more than that, what do you do when you discover that the person who took your last name already had another one, in another city, with another family? I'm speaking softly because this story doesn't need shouting. It needs calm, and a bit of courage to stay until the end. Let me confess something, I still don't know if I was a victim or an accomplice in what happened. My name is Ricardo, I'm 49 years old, and for a long time I thought my biggest mistake was choosing the wrong person to marry. Now I know the mistake went deeper. I needed to believe in someone, at any cost, even when the signs were way too clear. And yes, in this story there's a name that echoes again and again, Lidia, my ex-wife. And another name that haunts her all the way to the end, my mother, Mariana. Let me ask you something right now, so you can carry it in the back of your mind as I talk. If your mother, an ex-state investigator with a nose for fraud, told you that your wife is not who she says she is, who would you believe? When I met Lidia, I wasn't some naive teenager. I'd already been through a painful breakup, a half-failed business, and a father who died way too soon. I thought of myself as a grown man, with enough scars not to be fooled by anyone. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. I met her at a meeting with suppliers for the family business. I was in a white shirt, tie slightly loose, carrying that blend of exhaustion and formality you see in people who've been arguing over numbers all day. She arrived late, in a wine-colored dress that didn't stand out because of the cut, but because of the way it moved with every step she took. Her hair was pulled back into a simple bun, rectangular glasses, a folder pressed against her chest. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something subtler. First, it was her voice, steady, clear, with a calm that threw me off balance. While she presented her proposals, she moved with a confidence that wasn't arrogant, more like calculated. Every figure she mentioned came with a story, and I, who grew up watching my mother take apart financial statements during her days in the prosecutor's office, could tell right away that Lidia knew her numbers and how to sell them. Then came the physical detail, the one you don't admit out loud. The way her fingers played with the edge of the folder, how she crossed her leg under the table, her shoe brushing my pants, just barely, every time she leaned in to point at a figure. I can't say she did it on purpose, but I can't say it was random either. All I know is that my breathing changed. And she noticed. Has that ever happened to you? That moment when someone pretends not to notice the effect they're having on you, but you can feel them adjusting the rhythm of their smile to match your nervousness. At the end of the meeting, as everyone was getting up, she came over, held out her hand, and said, "Thank you for your time, Ricardo. Your mother must be proud of what you've built." It startled me that she knew about my mother. "You know Mariana?" I asked. She smiled with that half-smile I would later learn to decode as "I've already done my homework." "Let's just say I prepared," she answered. "A family business like this doesn't make sense unless you know who built it." Her hand was warm, her skin soft but her grip firm. Accidentally, her thumb brushed the inside of my wrist. I felt a small electric jolt that made me hold on to her hand 1 second longer than I should have. That night, alone in my apartment, I caught myself thinking more about her fingers than about the numbers we discussed. My eyes kept drifting to the empty space on the couch, as if she had just been sitting there minutes before. I turned off the light, but her image stayed in my head, her profile against the window, her glasses sliding down a little, the way she smoothed her dress as she sat down. And that's where it all began. Let me ask you, how much do you think we really choose who we fall in love with, and how much are we just answering some need we were already carrying inside us? My mother, Mariana, has that gaze that cuts straight through people. She spent almost 30 years as an investigator with the prosecutor's office. Her specialty, fraud and tax evasion schemes. When I was a kid, I was fascinated watching her go through case files with highlighters, drawing arrows between shell companies, repeated names, fake addresses. To me, she was like a hunter of white-collar lies. The first time I mentioned Lidia, my mother just raised an eyebrow. I was visiting her on a Sunday. She was cooking something simple, chicken and rice, as if life were just normal. New supplier, she asked, stirring the pot. Yeah. Well, a female supplier, I said, and I heard my own voice come out a little softer than usual. Mariana put down the spoon and looked at me with those dark eyes that don't let anything slide. Ricardo, she said slowly. When your tone drops like that, you're not talking to me about suppliers. I laughed, uneasy. You're exaggerating, Mom. I'm just telling you about someone new who started working with the company. Uh-huh, she answered, without a smile. And does this someone have a name? Lidia. My mother repeated the name under her breath, like she was trying it on for size. Lidia, she said. And what does Lidia do? Financial consultant. Handles portfolios, restructures debt, that kind of thing. Perfect, Mariana replied. Then you're going to bring me her proposal so I can review it. I don't want us getting dragged into any weird scheme. Her comment irritated me. Not everyone who deals with money is a criminal, Mom. She went back to the rice. You're right. But almost all criminals deal with money. And the difference is always in the details. In that moment, her distrust felt over the top, almost insulting. I was just getting to know Lidia, and already I felt like my mother was putting her on some imaginary blacklist. Has it ever happened to you? You want to introduce someone important in your life, and you can already feel your parents or your friends showing up with a knife in hand, ready to carve out their flaws? The ironic thing is, Lidia knew from the very start that my mother would be an obstacle. She told me one night, long before we got married. It was one of those nights that seem designed for letting your guard down, soft rain tapping against the windows, the city lit up in the distance, a half-finished bottle of wine on the table. We were in my living room. She had taken off her shoes and was walking barefoot across the carpet in a simple black dress, knee-length. The sound of her steps was no more than a whisper. I was sitting on the couch when she came over with her glass in hand. She leaned in a little, resting one knee on the cushion, ending up just a few centimeters away from me. The neckline of her dress didn't show much, but the fabric fell along the curve of her chest in a way that made it hard to focus on anything else. Her scent, a mix of wood and something floral, hit me straight on. Your mom doesn't trust me, she said, no preamble. The comment caught me off guard. She doesn't know you, I answered. She's suspicious by profession. Lidia brought the glass to my lips, offering me a sip without taking her eyes off mine. Her eyelashes seemed to decide when to blink, like she was in control of even that. No, Ricardo, she said. We women know how to read looks. Your mother looked at me the way you look at someone you don't want anywhere near your son. I knew what she meant. The first time they met, Mariana had been polite, but cold. Very direct questions, no courtesy smiles. She's exaggerating, I insisted. Lidia set the glass down on the table and moved a little closer. Her knee brushed my thigh, her hand slid, slowly, up my neck until it came to rest at the back of my head. Just promise me one thing, she whispered, so close I could feel her warm breath against my ear. Promise me you'll always listen to your own opinion of me too. Not just hers. That word, too, stuck in me. I'd grown up admiring my mother's intuition, and yet that night, for the first time, I started to feel it as a threat to this new intimacy that was forming between Lidia and me. She sensed it and, without saying anything else, pressed her forehead against mine. I closed my eyes. The world shrank to the damp of her breath, the press of her chest against my shirt, the heat collecting in that tiny pocket of air between us. Tell me something, If someone you like touches you like that, talks to you like that, asks you to trust your own judgment, wouldn't you also start to distrust, just a little, the people warning you about them? The relationship moved fast. Too fast, some would say. By the time I realized it, we'd been dating 6 months, living practically together for 4, and one morning, when we woke up, Lydia looked at me with that seriousness she reserved for financial matters and said, "I don't want to keep being your girlfriend. Either I'm your wife, or I go back to being just Lydia." I wasn't planning on getting married again so soon. After my first divorce, I'd sworn I'd take things slow. But Lydia had this way of placing the topic on the table like it was the only logical decision. "Life is short," she said, playing with the button on my shirt while I was still trying to peel my eyes open. "You and I are past the age where we can afford to waste time." Her fingers traced slow circles on my chest, right beneath my collarbone. Every word came paired with a touch that pressed on some kind of pressure point, like she knew exactly where the switch between my logic and my desire was. "Besides," she added, glancing toward the window where the morning light was barely creeping in, "legal things are easier when there's a piece of paper involved. Projects, property, everything's simpler when there's a marriage." That phrase, "legal things," should have set off every alarm bell in my head, being the son of a fiscal investigator. But it didn't. What I heard was projects, property, sharing. When I told my mother the news, she didn't smile. "So soon?" she asked, drying her hands on a kitchen towel. "I've already been divorced once, Mom," I said. "It's not like I'm getting married at 22. "That's exactly the problem," she replied. "At 40, you should know that things that move fast are almost never free." There was a long pause. I braced for the lecture, but instead she leaned against the doorframe and spoke in a more neutral tone, almost clinical. "Give me her full name, date of birth, and ID number," she said. "And please, don't make that face. I'm not going to stop your wedding. I just want to know who you're going to marry." I felt like she was treating me like just another case file. "Isn't meeting her enough for you?" I asked, annoyed. "No," she said, simply. "It's not enough for me to know anyone based only on what they say about themselves. Including you." That's where a crack opened up. A first fracture between my loyalty to my mother and what I was starting to feel for Lydia. What would you have done? Would you give your mother that information so she can look into your partner? Or would you see it as crossing a line? Me, stuck in my wounded pride, made the first mistake. I gave her information, but not all of it. Full name, a copy of her voter ID, and nothing else. I didn't mention, for example, that Lydia refused to talk about her life before 30, that she changed the subject every time I asked about her family, or that the few photos she had on her phone were all fairly recent. My mother, with what she had, did what she knew how to do, she cross-checked data. She didn't tell me at the time. She carried on, went to the wedding, was the first to arrive at the church and the last to leave the reception. I watched her dance with Lydia, both of them with polite, measured smiles, like two chess players moving their pieces without ever taking their eyes off the board. There was a moment that night that burned itself into my memory. The music was low, the lights warm. Lydia, in her fitted white dress, was dancing very close to me, her hands around my neck, her forehead almost pressed to mine. The soft fabric slid against my chest, and every time she breathed I felt that slight movement, that gentle rise and fall, like tiny waves breaking on a shore. "I love you," she whispered in my ear, right in the middle of a slow song. "And I'm going to make sure you never regret this." I was convinced she meant it. It never even crossed my mind that while she was whispering those words to me, somewhere else there was another city, another registry office, and another man who might have been hearing an "I love you" just like mine, from the same mouth. I found that out later. Much later. The first months of marriage went by and, on the surface, everything seemed fine. Lydia got involved in the company, suggested restructuring some debts, pushed for certain investments. She spoke in technical terms I only half understood, but they sounded solid. My mother stayed in the background, watching. Sometimes, at family dinners, I'd see her silent, pushing her food around the plate without eating, staring at Lydia like she was looking at an unfinished puzzle. One night, after a particularly tense dinner, Mariana asked to speak to me alone. Ricardo, she said, closing the kitchen door, I need you to listen to this with your head, not your heart. That opening line already annoyed me. So, I said, what's Lidia done now? Breathe wrong? She didn't rise to the bait. I did an informal check on her, she said, no sugarcoating. There are things that don't add up. My jaw tightened. You went digging into my wife? I went to protect my son, she corrected. I found repeated changes of address, almost every 2 years. Different states. Jobs that don't fit the timeline. And a complete blank before she turned 30. Maybe she had a rough life, I shot back. Not everyone has your perfect record, Mom. Mariana sighed, tired. I'm not telling you to leave her. I'm just asking you not to put any property in her name, not to mix accounts, not to sign anything she asks you to sign without showing it to me first. That suggestion felt like a direct insult to my marriage. I can't live like that, I told her. I'm not going to treat my wife like a suspect. My mother looked at me for a long time. Fine, she said at last. Just remember I warned you. That phrase, remember I warned you, is one of the cruelest things a mother can say. Because it's not a threat. It's a prophecy. Let me ask you, where does self-respect end inside a relationship? And how far should we let family go in commenting on our decisions? After that conversation, distance grew between my mother and me. Lidia noticed it right away. She hugged me more often, sat on my lap when I got home from work, stood behind me while I checked account statements, her hands on my shoulders, her chest pressed against my back, her mouth close to my ear. I don't want to come between you and your mom, she'd say in that soft tone. If you want, I'll step back from the company, so she doesn't feel pushed aside. That mix of sacrifice and sensuality was hard to resist. Guilty, I'd end up swiveling the chair, pulling her into my arms, holding her close. She'd tilt her head, look at me with those eyes that seemed to say, I'm your safe place. And for a while, she was. Or at least, that's what I believed. Meanwhile, without my knowing it, things were moving on a different stage, at the tax authority. A fraud investigation had started months earlier into a network of companies used for money laundering and tax evasion. One last name kept appearing in documents and contracts, Lydia's maiden name. Not as the main culprit, but as a representative, a legal proxy, a minor partner. Enough to get her splashed. Enough that, if they turned up the heat, she'd end up in prison. This is where Lydia's real talent came into play. She didn't just know how to seduce men. She knew how to seduce systems. She got ahead of the investigation. She changed cities at just the right time, changed jobs, cut ties with certain people. And as part of her survival strategy, she married me. Why me? Because my family had a clean company, with a good reputation, with connections. And because my mother, retired or not, was still a known name in the halls of the prosecutor's office. Marrying me was, for Lidia, something like buying insurance. Not just financial insurance. Penal insurance. It took me far too long to see it. The first clear sign, for me, came in the shape of a phone call. It was an ordinary Tuesday. We were having dinner at home, plates still hot on the table, when her phone rang. Lidia looked at the screen for a second and her face changed, just a bit, like someone had flipped off an internal light. She stood up abruptly. I'm going to the study, she said. Work call. There wouldn't have been anything strange about it if it hadn't been for the way she closed the study door behind her. And for the fact that, down the hallway, her voice sounded more nervous than professional. I couldn't make out words, just tones. Low, urgent, clipped. When she came out 15 minutes later, she was pale. Everything okay? I asked. She smiled at me, but her eyes didn't follow. Yeah. Just a hysterical supplier. Nothing serious. I walked over to hug her, but her body was tense, rigid, like I was wrapping my arms around a statue. Lidia, I insisted. If there's something I should know. She pulled back just enough to look me straight in the eye. If there ever is something you need to know, she said slowly, I'll be the one to tell you. Not over the phone, not through anyone else. Is that clear? Her tone shut down any further questions. But not my doubts. Let me ask you, when someone you love is clearly hiding something, but swears they're doing it to protect you, do you believe them? Or do you start storing those little lies like pebbles in your pocket, knowing that sooner or later they're going to weigh you down? A few days later, my mother called me over to her place. Her voice on the phone was the one she used for serious cases, not for family matters. "Ricardo, I need to see you without Lidia," she said. The way she said it annoyed me, but I went. I got to her apartment and found her at the dining table, surrounded not by plates, but by papers. Simple copies, printouts, handwritten notes. It was the same scene I remembered from childhood, whenever a big case was about to break. "Sit," she said. I did, with a mix of fear and irritation. "I told you there were things that didn't add up," she began. I was right. She laid out the documents, marriage certificates from another city, in the name of a woman with Lydia's exact name, same date of birth, same photograph. A different married last name, of course. Contracts where she appeared as a legal representative for companies under investigation. Changes of address lined up with the closing of suspicious businesses. "This can't be," I muttered, feeling the blood drain from my hands. "It is," my mother replied. "And that's not even the worst part." She showed me a document I'd never seen before, an official notice from the tax authority, addressed to Lydia's old address, announcing the start of proceedings for tax fraud. Date: 2 months before she met me. "She married you knowing she was already under investigation," Mariana said. "It wasn't love that made her hurry. It was necessity." I stayed silent, a knot closing around my throat. My mind scrambled for alternative explanations, administrative mistakes, extraordinary coincidences. "It could be someone else," I managed to say. "It's a common name. Photos can sometimes." My mother looked at me with compassion, but she didn't soften. "Ricardo, really look at it," she said, tapping the picture on the document. "That's your wife. And not just that, legally, she was already another man's wife when she married you. It's called bigamy." The word hit me like a punch. Bigamy. It wasn't just a betrayal of the heart. It was a crime. And in that moment, something strange happened. It wasn't an explosion of rage I felt, but a kind of cold emptiness. Like someone had opened a window in the middle of my chest and let in freezing air. My pain fell into place, became almost logical. "What do you want me to do?" I asked at last. My mother sighed. "I want you to do nothing, yet," she said. "Let me handle this. If we go straight to confronting her, she could disappear. And believe me, she knows how to do that." "And in the meantime?" I shot back. "I sleep next to her in the same bed, look her in the eyes, and pretend nothing's going on?" "In the meantime," Mariana answered, looking straight at me, "you act. Pretend you don't know. Let her feel safe. And you let me prepare what comes next." That's when I understood what it means to master pain with a cold mind. It's not about not feeling. It's about feeling, and still choosing each move. I won't lie to you, going back home that night was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I opened the door and found her in the living room, in comfy clothes, hair down, the TV on low. It looked like a perfectly normal married scene. She smiled, got up, and walked over to hug me. Her body fit against mine like always, her scent hit me like always. For a moment, I almost managed to believe that what I'd seen wasn't real. But the image of her photo on that document, next to another man, with the word spouse printed underneath, kept pounding in my head. She kissed me softly at the corner of my mouth. "You're late," she whispered. "I was waiting for you." Her hand slid down my chest, slowly, like she was moving across familiar ground. I let her, but something in my response had changed. I don't know if it was the stiffness in my shoulders, or the lack of enthusiasm in my breathing. She noticed. "Is everything okay?" she asked, looking me in the eyes. And that's when I had to act. I'm just tired, I lied. A lot of work. Lydia held my gaze a few seconds longer, searching for something. Then, instead of pressing, she rested her head against my chest, her fingers tracing soft lines along my waist. If you need to talk, I'm here, she said. I don't want you carrying your burdens alone. I felt a strange wave of nausea, some twisted mix of tenderness and disgust. How many times had she said that line or some version of it to other men? How many times had she played out this exact gesture? Let me ask you, if you were in my place, would you have confronted her that same night? Or would you have gone along with the act too, waiting for the right moment? The days that followed were a kind of macabre theater. I moved around the house like an actor who knows how the play ends, but still has to deliver every scene, every line, in order. Lydia, for her part, kept up her routines, work calls, meetings, financial proposals for the company, nights of wine and whispered confidences with me. My mother, meanwhile, activated her network. Former colleagues, officials, lawyers. She found out that the investigation into the network of companies where Lydia appeared was about to pivot. Some were negotiating plea deals. Others were threatening to drag everyone down with them. Lydia's name was going to surface much sooner than she thought. It was Mariana who came up with the idea of taking everything to court in a single move, protect the family business, expose Lydia, and at the same time hand her over to the authorities with enough evidence. This isn't about revenge, she told me. It's about making sure she doesn't take you down with her. I sat there listening, facing her, feeling like my life had turned into just another case file spread out on her table. There's going to be an important hearing in a few weeks, she explained. Your wife thinks she's going in as a good faith witness, that she'll be able to sell the idea that this was all just a misunderstanding. What she doesn't know is that by then, we'll already have submitted the certificate of her other marriage, the proof of her identity changes, and her involvement with the companies under investigation. And me? I asked. You're going to be there, Mariana replied. Watching everything. And when the time comes, you're going to say one single sentence, that you knew absolutely nothing about her previous life, and that you feel like the victim of a deception. That phrase, victim of a deception, hurt more than anything else. Not because of what it implied about her, but because of what it said about me. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. Lydia, on the other hand, seemed calmer than ever. She lay down beside me, turned toward me in bed, and pressed her body against mine, tangling her legs with my legs. Her hand moved slowly across my bare back, tracing shapes I knew by heart. Her warm breath hit the side of my neck. Whatever happens tomorrow, she whispered, remember that I love you. If I hadn't known what I knew, that line would have moved me. But now it just sounded like part of a strategy, a well-rehearsed script. Even so, my body responded. I'm not going into details, you don't need them. I'll just say this, there's a particular kind of humiliation in still wanting someone even when you know they're lying to you. It's as if one part of you refuses to surrender, even while the other part has already started packing its bags. Do you think desire should switch off automatically the moment we discover a betrayal? Or is it normal that the body takes longer than the mind to accept reality? The day of the hearing was gray. Low clouds, heavy air. Lydia dressed in a navy blue pantsuit, sober, elegant. Her hair pulled back in a flawless bun, makeup discreet. She looked more like a senior executive than a suspect. In the car, on the way to the courthouse, she took my hand. Thank you for being here, she said, without looking at me. I don't know what I'd do without you. I tightened my fingers around hers, feeling her skin warm, alive. And I hated myself a little for not pulling away. For still playing my part, even when we were already at the final scene. When we arrived, we ran into lawyers, officials, strangers. My mother was there too, quietly seated on one of the benches in the back. Lydia saw her and gave a tense little smile. Your mom came, she said. That means that deep down, she trusts me. I didn't answer. The hearing started like so many others, roll call, identification, reading of charges. Lydia spoke several times, with that structured calm I'd always admired in her. She explained financial movements, justified decisions. She sounded like she was convincing everyone that if there had been irregularities, they hadn't been her fault. Until it was time for the additional documents submitted by the prosecution. That's when the marriage certificate from another city appeared. Same face. Same name. Different husband. The murmur through the room was inevitable. Lydia froze, her hands resting on the table. Her jaw tightened just a little. For the first time, I saw a crack in her mask. "Mrs. Lydia," the judge said, voice grave. "Can you explain why you appear as the spouse of another person, in a marriage entered into prior to the one you currently hold with Mr. Ricardo?" The silence was thick. I could feel every gaze shifting from her to me, and from me back to her. Lydia searched for me with her eyes. In that look I didn't see love. I didn't see remorse. I saw calculation. She was measuring how much I knew, how much she could still control. "There must be some mistake," she said at last. "Someone used my information." That happens a lot in these cases. That's when Mariana stood from the back bench. She didn't speak herself, of course. The lawyers did, presenting more evidence, address records, matching signatures, photographs. The net was closing. I watched it all almost from outside my own body, like a movie where you suddenly realize the main character is not who you thought they were. Then it was my turn to speak. They called me as a witness. I stood up, walked to the stand. I could feel Lydia's gaze drilling into my back. At the microphone, the judge asked me to state my full name and my relationship to the accused. "My name is Ricardo," I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I expected. "And until today, I believed I was her husband." That "until today" made something shift in the room. It wasn't some dramatic line I'd planned. It came from the exact place where disbelief crashes into resignation. The lawyer asked if I had known about the existence of that other marriage, about the fraud investigation, about the companies where she appeared. "No, Your Honor," I answered. "I had absolutely no knowledge of her previous life. I married her believing she was free of all of this. Today I feel like the victim of a deception." There it was. The sentence. Spoken. Sealed. From that moment on, my story with Lydia stopped being something private and became part of a public case file. Lydia looked at me. In her eyes I saw a mix of reproach and something I still don't know how to name. Real sadness? Wounded pride because someone had outplayed her? I don't know. What I do know is that, for the first time, she realized she had underestimated my mother. The hearing went on. It wasn't a movie. There were no screams, no dramatic confessions, no fists slamming on tables. Just procedure, cited articles, deadlines. Lydia, through her lawyer, tried to maintain that it had all been a misunderstanding, that she herself was a victim of third parties. But there was too much evidence. Too precise. Too sharp. When they ordered precautionary measures, including her being taken into custody, I felt a hollow drop in my stomach. I watched her stand up in handcuffs while an officer took her by the arm. Her blue suit, so impeccable that morning, now looked like it belonged to someone who'd aged 10 years in just a few hours. Before they let her out, she searched for my eyes. This time there was no calculation. Just a silent question: "Are you really going to let this happen?" And the answer, the one I didn't say out loud, was, "It already happened. You built this long before you met me." Let me ask you, in a moment like that, do you think someone should feel satisfaction, relief, sadness? Or all of it at once, blended into a kind of sick, heavy calm? When we left the courthouse, Mariana walked up to me. She didn't hug me. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just put her hand on my shoulder and squeezed for a second. "You did well," she murmured. I nodded, not really sure if that was true. We went back home, but the house wasn't a home anymore. It was the scene of an emotional crime. Every object reminded me of something: the mug where Lydia drank her morning coffee, the perfume bottle on the bathroom shelf, the annotated books in the living room. None of that evaporated just because there was now a detention order with her name on it. The days that followed were strange. The press didn't care much, it wasn't loud enough for the headlines. But in our small circle? Oh, yes. Curious looks at the office, whispers at family gatherings, calls from friends who just wanted to know how I was doing. My mother insisted on one thing: separate my finances from Lydia's, cancel her powers of attorney, shield the company. We did it, step by step. Each signature I laid down on a document was, at the same time, an act of protection and a small farewell to the life I'd imagined with her. I never went to see her in prison. I could have. She asked for me, through her lawyer. She wanted to explain. I chose not to listen. Not because I wasn't curious, but because I already knew how capable she was of wrapping any truth in words warm enough to make it tolerable. And for the first time in my life, I needed not to tolerate anything. With time, her case moved forward. There were deals, there were sentences, there were names dragged into the light. She didn't end up with some exemplary punishment, but she did wind up with enough of a record that her career in the financial world, at least for a while, was stained. Do you think that was enough punishment? Or are there things prison can never really balance out? What cost me the most wasn't forgiving her. It was forgiving myself. Accepting that with all my resources, with my mother's example, with all my life experience, I had still let myself be conned. Not by a naive teenager, but by an adult woman, intelligent, dangerous. And then realizing it wasn't only her fault. There was a part of me that needed that kind of love too, conditional, theatrical, intense. A love that whispers, without me, you're incomplete. With Mariana, the relationship changed as well. There were months of tense silence. I avoided her because being around her reminded me she'd been right. She gave me space because she knew shame is a room you sometimes need to sit in alone for a while. One day, I went back to her apartment. She was sitting in the living room, reading. She looked up, motioned for me to sit. She didn't mention Lydia. We talked about the weather, about the company, about trivial things. Until finally, she said, "I'm sorry it had to be this way." "Which part?" I asked. "All of it," she replied. "That you fell in love with someone who wasn't who she said she was. That I had to be the one to show you. That your pain ended up tangled with my profession. There are things you just can't separate." I watched her for a long time. For the first time, I didn't just see the investigator, I saw the woman who, at some point, chose that line of work and paid her own price for it. "Thank you," I said. "If it weren't for you, I'd be sunk with her." "Maybe," she answered. "Or maybe not. Something would have eventually made you wake up. The problem is, sometimes we wake up when it's already too late." There was a silence, but this time it wasn't hostile. "Do you hate her?" she asked suddenly. I thought about my answer carefully. "I don't know if I hate her," I said. "Sometimes I miss her. Not the con artist, the version of her I believed in. I miss the nights when she made me feel like everything made sense. Even if it was a lie." Mariana nodded. "That's normal," she said. "Sometimes we don't miss the person. We miss the story we were telling ourselves when we were with them." Today, as I tell you this, years have gone by. Lydia is a name that almost never comes up in the family anymore. When my friends joke about complicated exes, sometimes they glance at me sideways, like they're apologizing with their eyes. I've rebuilt myself slowly: therapy, work, new bonds, more honest, slower. I've dated other women. Some good, some not so much. I've learned to pick up on certain gestures, vague answers, carefully placed silences. I didn't turn paranoid, but I did become more attentive. And, above all, I've learned to listen more to my own intuition, and to the intuition of people who genuinely care about me, even when they say things in ways I don't like. I'm not going to tell you I'm happier than ever now. That would be a lie. There are nights, especially when the city finally goes quiet, when I remember the way Lydia rested her head on my chest, how her fingers always traced the same path down my back, like a map she knew by heart. And I wonder how many times she repeated that gesture with other men, in other beds, in other cities. But there are other nights when, as I close my eyes, I see myself again on that witness stand, saying, until today, I believed I was her husband. And I feel a kind of sad pride for having been able, at least once, to put words to my own deception in front of everyone. If you've made it this far, I'll leave you with one last question. What's worse, being deceived by someone you love, or refusing to see the truth when it's right in front of you? Because I still don't have a clear answer. All I know is this: I don't know if I stopped loving Lidia, or if I just stopped believing in the story she told me whenever she kissed my eyelids and promised I would never regret choosing her. But ever since I accepted what she did, I sleep a little more peacefully. And that, believe me, is already something. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have believed your mother sooner? Do you think someone like Lidia deserves a second chance, or are there lines that, once crossed, can never really be erased? Leave me your answers in the comments. Give me your best advice, from your own experience, or from your fears. And if this story made you think of someone, of a doubtful relationship, of a gut feeling you've been ignoring, share it. Maybe that person needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to the WinOwl channel, like this video, and turn on notifications for more stories like this, stories that aren't pretty, but are true. Because in the end, we're all a little responsible for the lies we accept. And for the truths we decide to look straight in the eye.